The first alien to ask me what hunted humans did not expect the answer. That was obvious from the way her four hands stopped moving. She had been arranging the diplomatic tablets in front of her with obsessive precision, aligning each translucent slate with the edge of the table. One represented our biology. Another contained the ecological history of Earth. A third contained the final assessment prepared by the Galactic Ecological Authority. And the fourth was empty. That was the problem. Ambassador Selari stared at me from across the table. Behind her, the observation chamber had gone completely silent. 37 representatives from 37 worlds had gathered to witness humanity's first formal ecological classification. We had already been categorized by intelligence, technology, social structure, interstellar capability, potential military threat, economic value, disease resistance, psychological adaptability. Everything was complete. Everything except one question. A question so simple that nobody in the room had imagined it would become the most important question of the entire examination. Selari looked down at the empty tablet, then back at me. According to the records, she said slowly, "Every sapient species has a natural predator." I waited. She touched the blank screen. "The classification system requires us to identify yours." Still, I said nothing, because I already knew where this was going. She adjusted her posture. "Dr. Elias Valle, what species hunts humanity?" A few heads turned toward me. I looked around the chamber. There were creatures with armored shells, creatures covered in scales, creatures whose ancestors had evolved poisonous blood. One delegation came from an ocean world where every major animal species possessed teeth capable of cutting through metal-based coral. Another species had evolved beneath a permanently dark atmosphere and could detect movement through vibrations in the ground. Every civilization in that room had a predator. Every one of them had inherited some ancient instinct telling them that somewhere out there, something stronger was hungry. I leaned back in my chair. Then I said, "Do you mean now?" Selari blinked. "At any point in your evolutionary history." I considered the question. "That depends on what you mean by hunted." The room became quieter. That was when I realized the humans standing behind the observation glass were no longer the only ones trying not to smile. Selari's expression tightened. "I believe the question is sufficiently clear." "Oh, it's clear." I folded my hands. "You just might not like the answer." She stared at me. "Please provide it." So I did. Nothing. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then a representative from a Varn collective made a sound somewhere between a cough and a laugh. Selari ignored him. Nothing. Nothing consistently. Her eyes narrowed. "That is biologically impossible." I smiled. And that was the exact moment the Galactic Ecological Authority began to understand why humanity had been such a difficult species to classify. Because the problem wasn't that we had no predators. The problem was that the galaxy had been asking the wrong question. The real question was never, what hunted humans? The real question was, what happened to everything that tried? The examination had started 12 days earlier. Officially, humanity had been invited to the Asterian Ecological Station as part of our final admission process into the Galactic Assembly. Unofficially, we had been brought there because the Assembly didn't know what the hell to do with us. We had entered interstellar space only 46 years before. That was absurdly fast by galactic standards. Most civilizations spent centuries developing reliable planetary infrastructure before building a stable, faster-than-light network. Humanity, apparently, had looked at the stars and collectively decided that waiting was inefficient. The Assembly found this concerning. I found it normal. I had been selected as one of 6 human specialists assigned to answer questions about Earth's ecosystem. The others were experts in climate systems, microbiology, anthropology, agriculture, and planetary geology. I was the evolutionary biologist, which meant that whenever the aliens wanted to know why humans behaved like humans, they sent the question to me. The first few days were easy. Too easy. They asked about our senses. Not impressive. Our physical strength. Embarrassing compared to most of the species present. Our natural weapons. Almost non-existent. No clothes. No armor. No venom. No fangs worth mentioning. Our average running speed was mediocre. Our night vision was terrible. We couldn't breathe underwater. We couldn't survive extreme temperatures without manufactured clothing. We could be killed by falling badly. One of the senior examiners actually laughed when she learned that. Not maliciously, just honestly amused. "You are telling me," Examiner Thesk said, "that your dominant species can suffer fatal injury from incorrectly interacting with the ground?" "Yes." "How frequently?" "More often than we'd like." Thesk stared at her tablet. "And you became the dominant species on your planet?" "Yes." She looked at me, then at the tablet, then back at me. How? That question followed me for the rest of the examination. How? How had an animal with no claws become the dominant force on its planet? How had a species that could be poisoned by tiny organisms, crushed by animals, drowned in shallow water, frozen, burned, infected, bitten, stung, starved, and accidentally killed by furniture, somehow become the species that controlled the environment around it? The aliens expected an answer involving intelligence. And yes, intelligence mattered. But intelligence alone wasn't enough. There were intelligent animals on Earth before humans. There were powerful animals, fast animals, venomous animals, animals with armor, animals with senses so advanced that human perception looked primitive. That wasn't what put us at the top. What put us there was something far more dangerous. We noticed problems, and then we refused to leave them alone. On the fourth day, the authority introduced us to a creature called a Carsid. That was when the mood changed. The Carsid wasn't intelligent. It didn't need to be. It came from a planet called Rethva, a world with an oxygen-rich atmosphere and enormous forest ecosystems. The Carsid stood almost 3 meters tall when fully extended. It had 8 limbs, 6 eyes, a jaw capable of exerting enough force to fracture industrial composite plating. Its outer skin was covered in overlapping biological armor, and its saliva contained a paralytic compound strong enough to immobilize an adult Varn within seconds. The Galactic Authority classified it as a Category 8 apex predator, the highest classification assigned to a non-sapient biological organism. A hologram of the animal appeared in the center of the chamber. Several humans leaned forward. That was our first mistake. The aliens noticed. Ambassador Cellari looked toward us. "Is there something concerning about the specimen?" My colleague, Dr. Maya Chun, answered before I could stop her. "Can we see it?" The entire room went silent. Cellari slowly turned her head. "You wish to observe it?" "Yes." "Directly?" Maya shrugged. "If that's possible." Thesk stared at us. "The Carsid has killed 31 trained researchers." Maya nodded. "That's unfortunate. That is not the response I expected." Maya looked confused. "What response were you expecting?" Thesk paused. "Fear." Maya glanced at me, then back at the hologram. "Dr. Valle." I sighed. "Don't involve me. Would you like to see it?" "Yes." Thesk's expression changed, and not in a good way. Within 2 hours, 6 humans and 17 alien observers were standing behind a reinforced barrier looking into a controlled biome. The Carsid was sleeping. At first, then one of the human technicians sneezed. The animal woke up. Every alien in the observation room took 1 step backward. Every human took 1 step forward. I want to be very clear. That was not bravery. It was curiosity. And the Galactic Assembly did not understand that curiosity was going to become a recurring problem. The Carsid rose slowly. It unfolded. That was the only way to describe it. Limbs extending, armor plates shifting, 6 black eyes opening one after another. The creature turned toward the glass. The Varn observer beside me whispered something in his language. The translation system rendered it as, "Oh no." The Carsid walked toward us. Each step made the floor vibrate. Closer, 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 until it was standing directly against the barrier. Its head lowered. One enormous eye fixed on me. The alien observers stopped breathing. The human technician beside me raised his hand and waved. I closed my eyes. The Carsid tilted its head. Then it opened its mouth. The roar hit the barrier hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. The Varn fell backward. Someone screamed. The Carsid slammed both front limbs against the glass. Emergency alarms activated. And from somewhere behind me, Maya said, "I wonder if it's social." That was when Examiner Thesk turned around and looked at us. Not with fear. Not exactly. It was worse. It was the look of someone beginning to suspect that the dangerous animal might not be the one inside the enclosure. The following morning, the authority changed our schedule. We were no longer simply answering questions. Now, they were asking for demonstrations. The first demonstration involved endurance. Humans did well. The second involved environmental adaptation. Humans did better. The third involved threat recognition. That was where everything started going wrong. The authority created simulated environments based on the deadliest ecosystems in known space. They wanted to see how each candidate species responded. The first world was a toxic jungle. The second had violent electrical storms. The third contained predators that hunted through sound. Most species reacted predictably. They avoided danger. They moved carefully. They minimized exposure. Humans did all of those things too, for approximately 10 minutes. Then someone started taking notes. The simulation ended. We didn't just ask how to survive. We asked why the predators hunted that way. What attracted them? What frightened them? What they ate? How often they reproduced? Whether they could be redirected? Whether they could be trapped? Whether their sensory organs could be disrupted? Whether their behavior could be predicted? And eventually, whether they tasted good. That last question got Dr. Chun removed from the simulation room. Temporarily, but the damage was done. The authority began reviewing human historical records. And that was when they discovered our relationship with the rest of Earth's food chain. At first, they were impressed, then confused, then deeply uncomfortable. The first thing they found was fire. Humans had learned to create it, control it. They expected to find evidence of a long, evolutionary struggle. They found one, just not the one they expected. A predator would threaten humans. Humans would learn about it. Humans would develop strategies. Humans would adapt. The predator would stop being a threat. Not always because we killed it. Sometimes because we avoided it. Sometimes because we built barriers. Sometimes because we learned its behavior. Sometimes because we removed ourselves from its habitat. But often, we simply became too difficult to hunt. And then there were the animals we didn't defeat. We befriended them. That discovery caused the second major crisis. It began with dogs. Examiner Thesk entered the human archive chamber carrying a tablet. She looked upset, not angry, scientifically upset, the kind of upset produced when reality refuses to follow the expected rules. She placed the tablet on the table. "Explain this." On the screen was a wolf. I looked at her. "That's a wolf. I am aware." "Then what needs explaining?" Thesk touched the display. A second image appeared. A golden retriever wearing a birthday hat. She pointed at it. "This." I leaned closer. "Oh." Thesk stared at me. "You converted the first creature into the second. Over thousands of years, yes." "Why?" I thought about it. "Companionship." She remained completely still. "That is not an acceptable scientific explanation." "Fair." So I explained. Cooperation, share hunting, protection, selective breeding, mutual adaptation. Eventually, the relationship became something more. The descendants of predators slept in our homes, protected our children, guided the blind, found survivors under collapsed buildings, located missing people, detected disease, worked with soldiers, helped police, guarded livestock, pulled sleds across frozen wilderness. And sometimes, they wore birthday hats. Thesk processed this information. Your species took a social apex predator. Yes. and incorporated it into your family structures. Basically, voluntarily, both species, more or less. She looked down at the picture again. The golden retriever was sitting beside a small human child. The child was hugging it. Thesk looked at me. Is the predator restrained? No. Sedated? No. Trained through dominance? Not necessarily. She turned the screen toward me. The child is smaller. Yes. Weaker. Definitely. Less dangerous. By every measurable biological standard. Thesk was silent. Then she said, and the predator permits this? Usually loves it. That was the moment she requested access to every recorded example of human-animal interaction. We gave it to her. That was our third mistake. By the end of the day, half the ecological authority was watching documentaries. Someone discovered horseback riding. Someone else discovered falconry. Then elephants. Then dolphins. Then cats. Cats cause confusion. The official report described the domestic cat as small predatory organism tolerated within human settlements despite repeated evidence of property damage, territorial aggression, and deliberate destruction of stored resources. The human delegation found that hilarious. The aliens did not understand why. Then they found videos. A cat knocking a glass from a table. A human watching. The cat looking directly at the human and slowly pushing the glass off the edge anyway. The Varn representative watched the footage 3 times. Then he turned to me. This creature is threatening you. Not exactly. It is clearly testing your boundaries. Yes. And you allow it to remain in your residence? Yes. Why? I thought about it. Then I said, because he's cute. That sentence entered the permanent galactic record. I know because Ambassador Cellari brought it up during my final examination. She did not find it funny. But the real problem came when the authority reached the large animals. The bears, the lions, the crocodiles, the sharks, the animals humans still respected, still feared, still occasionally died because of. The authority believed they had finally found our predators. And technically, they weren't wrong. A lion could kill a human. A bear could kill a human. A crocodile could kill a human. A shark could kill a human. So the authority began listing them. Until Maya asked a question. How many humans? Tess looked up. How many what? How many humans does it take for you to classify something as a predator of humanity? The room went silent. Thesk answered carefully. The ability to hunt your species is sufficient. Maya shook her head. No, that's not what you asked. Everyone looked at her. She continued. You asked what hunts humans. Singular events don't make something a species-level predator. Thesk frowned. Maya stood and walked toward the display. She pulled up an image of a lion. Does this animal hunt humans? On rare occasions. Does it prefer humans? No. Has humanity adapted its behavior specifically to avoid this species? Yes. Has humanity developed technology capable of preventing attacks? Yes. Does humanity actively monitor, contain, relocate, study, and manage populations of this animal? Yes. Maya nodded. Then she brought up the next animal, and the next, and the next. The same pattern repeated. Humans were vulnerable as individuals, but humanity as a species? That was different, because humanity did not walk into the world alone. A single human could be weak. A human group was something else. A village could build walls. A city could build systems. A civilization could study every predator on its planet. Track it, predict it, avoid it, control it, protect it, or, if necessary, destroy it. That was when the atmosphere in the room changed. Not because the aliens suddenly believed humans were powerful. They had already seen our technology. They knew what our ships could do. What disturbed them was something older, something buried beneath the machines. The technology wasn't what made humans dangerous. The technology was simply what happened when a certain kind of animal was given enough time to keep solving problems. 2 days later, the authority moved us to a place called the Wild Archive. It was not a zoo. The aliens were very clear about that. It was a planetary preservation facility containing organisms from worlds whose ecosystems were considered too dangerous for routine study. The most dangerous creatures were kept in isolated environments. We were there to observe. Nothing more. That instruction was repeated 7 times. I remember because Dr. Chin counted. The creature they wanted to show us was called the Auric. The Auric came from a high-gravity world. It had evolved in dense forests where every major species possessed some form of defensive weapon. The Auric had solved the problem by becoming stronger than all of them. It was nearly 4 meters long. Its outer shell was harder than military armor. It possessed 3 independently moving jaws, and it could detect living organisms through chemical traces nearly 2 kilometers away. The first human colonists who encountered it had called it, according to the translated records, the absolute worst. That name had not survived official scientific review, but I liked it. The authority kept the Auric behind 3 separate containment systems. We watched from an elevated platform. The animal was feeding. Nobody spoke. Then the Auric stopped. Its body went still. I noticed it first. So did Maya. We looked at each other. Did it smell us? The alien handler froze. The Auric slowly raised its head. 3 jaws opened. A warning tone began. The handler shouted something. The translation system turned it into, "Move." Everyone ran. That part was chaos. 37 different species trying to flee in 37 different ways. Some ran. Some climbed. One species rolled. A human security officer collided with me. The lights changed color. Containment doors began closing. Then there was a sound behind us. A metallic scream. The first barrier had failed. I turned. The Auric was coming through. Now, I want to tell you that I did something heroic. I did not. I saw a 4-meter alien predator break through a containment barrier, and I ran exactly as fast as evolution intended, which was not fast enough. The Auric was faster. One of the alien representatives fell. I heard the impact. Then the creature roared. It turned toward her. Everything happened at once. Security teams raised weapons. The handler screamed not to fire. The human security officer beside me stopped. He looked at the animal, then at the fallen representative, and ran toward it. I shouted after him. He ignored me. Of course he did. His name was Sergeant Marcus Hale, and until that moment, the aliens had categorized him as a protective personnel unit. They had no idea what that actually meant. Hale reached the fallen representative first. The Auric was almost on him. He grabbed her, dragged her toward a maintenance corridor. The Auric charged. Hale turned. No weapon, no armor capable of stopping the creature. No time. He reached down, grabbed an emergency tool from the floor, and threw it, not at the animal, past it. The metal cylinder struck the opposite wall. The Auric's head snapped toward the sound. Hale ran. The creature followed, away from the injured alien. The security teams realized what he was doing. He wasn't escaping. He was redirecting it. One of the handlers shouted, "What?" I heard Hale answer through the emergency comm. "Because it wants me," the alien beside me whispered. "Then why are you helping it hunt you?" That was an excellent question. I didn't have time to answer. Hale reached the corridor intersection. He triggered the emergency seal. The Auric lunged. The doors began closing. Hale dove through. The creature slammed into the gap. The corridor shook. The door stopped. Hale was pinned against the wall. The Auric's jaws pushed through the opening, and every weapon in the room locked onto the creature. "Don't fire," Hale shouted. The commander stared at him. "Why not?" "Because you'll hit the doors." The Auric pushed harder. Metal screamed. Hale looked around. Then he noticed something. A maintenance panel. He hit it. Once. Twice. The panel opened. He reached inside. Every alien watching screamed. I later learned that the corridor's emergency power system carried enough electrical energy to kill most large organisms. Hale pulled 2 cables free. The commander shouted, "Human, stop." Hale looked at the Auric, then at the cables. then smiled. I've always wanted to try this. He connected them. The corridor flashed white. The auric roared. The lights died. And for 1 second, everything was silent. Then the emergency power returned. The creature collapsed. Alive. Unconscious. Hale slid down the wall. Smoke rose from his gloves. The first thing he said was, "Did anybody get that on camera?" That footage was later classified. Not because of the auric, because of the aliens screaming. The incident ended the ecological examination. Officially, unofficially, it began a much larger one. The Galactic Assembly wanted to know something. Were humans dangerous because we were fearless? The answer was no. Hale had been terrified. Every human in that room had been terrified. I was terrified. Maya was terrified. The difference was that fear had never stopped being useful to us. Fear made us run, but also made us think. Fear made us build shelters, weapons, hospitals, alarm systems, cities. Fear told us something could hurt us. Then curiosity asked, how? And intelligence asked, why? And eventually someone always asked the most dangerous question of all. What if we tried something? That was how humanity climbed. Not because we were invincible, because every time the world knocked us down, somebody started looking for a better way to stand back up. Which brings me back to the empty tablet. Ambassador Cellari was still waiting. What hunts humanity? I looked at her. Then I looked at the blank classification screen. You want a single answer? Yes. Fine. I stood and walked toward the central display. On Earth, humans have been killed by predators. The chamber remained silent. Big cats, crocodiles, bears, sharks, snakes. Images appeared beside me, but none of them became the predator of humanity. I changed the display. A map of Earth appeared because humanity did something unusual. The representatives leaned forward. We stopped thinking like prey. Nobody moved. I continued. A prey animal survives by avoiding the predator. The display changed. A predator survives by defeating the prey. Another image. But humans did something else. The entire room was watching me now. We studied both. The final display appeared. Fire, tools, medicine, cities, ships, space. Every threat became information. I turned toward Cellari, and information became an advantage. She stared at me. So you are claiming that no species occupies a higher ecological position than humanity? I shook my head. No. Her expression changed. I smiled. That's not what I'm saying. I looked toward the observation glass. Behind it stood the rest of the human delegation. 6 scientists, 2 engineers, a medic, and Sergeant Hale, wearing a fresh uniform and pretending the electrical burns on his hands didn't hurt. Then I looked back at the aliens. I'm saying you're still thinking about the food chain as if it ends with an animal. Cellari didn't move. What does that mean? I touched the display. The image of Earth disappeared. The stars appeared. 100 inhabited worlds. Thousands of ecosystems. Millions of species. And one small blue planet near the edge of an ordinary star system. Every species in this chamber evolved inside an ecosystem. I said, humans did too. I paused. But eventually, the room waited. We learned how to redesign the ecosystem. Nobody spoke. That was the answer. Not the strength. Not the teeth. Not the weapons. Not even the intelligence. The truth was simpler and much more frightening. A lion sits at the top of a food chain because it can kill what is beneath it. A human stands at the top because eventually nothing around us gets to remain entirely outside our understanding. We learn it, map it, name it, study it, adapt to it, and then decide what to do next. Sometimes we protect it. Sometimes we coexist with it. Sometimes we domesticate it. Sometimes we destroy it. And that last part mattered, because the aliens had finally reached the conclusion humanity had spent centuries learning for itself. Being at the top was never the same thing as being safe. It meant responsibility, Power without restraint had nearly destroyed our world more than once. We knew what we were capable of. That was why we feared ourselves more than any predator. Cellari looked at the blank tablet. Slowly, she picked it up. What should I write? I thought about that. Then I said, don't write Apex Predator. Why not? Because that's still too small. She waited. So did everyone else. I looked out through the observation window. At the stars. At the worlds beyond them. At the endless wilderness waiting for us. Then I gave her the closest thing to an honest answer I could. Write this. Cellari raised the tablet. I spoke. Asterisk, asterisk humanity. Ecological classification unresolved. Asterisk, asterisk. Her eyes narrowed. That is not an answer. It is. Explain. I smiled. Because every time humanity thinks it has reached the top of something. I looked towards Sergeant Hale. He grinned. I looked back at Cellari. We find another top. The chamber went silent. Cellari stared at me for a long time. Then, very carefully, she deleted the empty classification field and replaced it with something else. Not predator, not prey, not apex. Something new. Something the Galactic Ecological Authority had never needed before. Environmental dominant. Humanity. Years later, historians would remember that meeting as the day humanity officially entered the Galactic Assembly. But that wasn't the part the other species remembered. They remembered what happened afterward. Because 3 weeks after our classification was approved, the Assembly received an emergency transmission from Colony World under attack. The planet's ecosystem had collapsed. An invasive predator was consuming everything. Crops, livestock, native animals. The colonial government had requested military assistance. The Assembly prepared warships. Humanity sent biologists. The aliens thought it was a mistake. Until 6 months later, the predator population had been controlled. The ecosystem was recovering. The creatures responsible had been captured and relocated to a protected habitat. And 3 human researchers had somehow trained one of the juvenile predators to recognize its name. When Ambassador Cellari heard about that last part, she reportedly sat down and did not speak for 11 minutes. Sergeant Hale later sent her a picture. The animal was lying beside a human campfire. A child was sitting on its back. Cellari never replied. But according to Assembly records, she added one private note to humanity's permanent file. It was discovered years later. It contained only one sentence. Never ask a human what hunts them unless you have several hours available. And underneath that, in smaller text. More importantly, never ask what humans have done with the things that tried. Because that, more than our ships, more than our weapons, more than our technology, was what the galaxy eventually learned to understand. Humans were never the biggest, never the fastest, never the strongest. We were simply the species that kept getting back up. The species that looked at teeth and built tools, looked at darkness and made fire, looked at oceans and built ships, looked at the sky and built wings, looked at the stars and built a way to reach them. Every world had a food chain. Every ecosystem had something at the top. But humanity? Humanity had spent its entire history proving that the top was never a permanent location. It was just the next problem waiting to be solved. And somewhere, beyond the worlds we already knew, another wilderness was waiting. Another predator. Another danger. Another impossible thing. Humanity would be afraid. Of course we would. We always were. Then someone would take a step closer. Someone would ask how it worked. Someone else would say they had an idea. And before long, the thing at the top of that food chain would discover what every predator on Earth had eventually learned. Humans may not look dangerous, right up until the moment they decide to understand you. And by then, it's usually too late. Because the day aliens learned humans sat at the top of every food chain was not the day they discovered that humanity was the galaxy's greatest predator. It was the day they discovered something far more complicated. Humans don't need to be the strongest creature in the room. We only need time. Time to observe. Time to learn, time to adapt, time to build, and eventually, time to decide what comes next.